Hey everyone. In this screencast, we're going to quickly go over how to create a new repository in GitHub and also how you're going to be turning in your assignments this semester. So let's start by creating a directory structure and kind of a format for turning in our assignments. So on my desktop, or anywhere for that matter, we're going to create a folder called TC349. And this is going to end up being the primary folder that we are going to save into GitHub. So right now, if we look, we have an empty directory. So what we want to do is we want to create a folder for each week of the class. We don't need to create all those right now, but we are going to need one for week 1, which we're currently in. So we're going to make a week 1 directory in TC349. And we should also make a final directory because we are going to start work on our final this week. So the other thing we'll need is a README file, and I'll explain this a little bit more later, but for right now, just go ahead and type touch README if you're on a Mac or Linux. If you're on Windows, just create a file called README. And that is what our directory should look like. It should be a directory called TC349 with a week 1 folder, a final folder, and a README file. So now if we go into week 1, obviously we don't have anything in here right now, but when you go to create your assignments, make sure in some weeks, including week 1, there's going to be multiple assignments. Make sure you put each of the individual assignments within week 1 in their own folder. You can name them whatever you want, but just make sure there's a clear organization there so that I know and understand what you have turned in. So let's head back out to the TC349 directory and just make sure everything is good. Yep. Alright, so at this point we can switch over to GitHub. Now, GitHub, at this point, you should have Git already installed on your computer, and you should already have a GitHub account set up. If you don't already have Git installed, and you can check to see if you have it installed by typing git version, it should print out the Git version. If you don't see anything, or if you see command not found, you need to make sure you follow the instructions for installing Git, and that is in the class reading and on some of the other screencasts. So at this point, you can go ahead and create a new repository in GitHub and give it a name. TC349 will work. It'll match the directory name we used. You can give it a description if you want. I'm going to leave that blank. And we can leave all of this stuff, this other stuff unchecked and blanks. Go ahead and create a repository. And if everything goes well, you should see this setup page. So you should see instructions for getting your repository set up and configured. So let's go through this. The global setup up here, we've already done that. Hopefully if you've installed Git, you should have already done that. If those variables, those global variables aren't set, go ahead and set them on the onset here. So the next thing we have to do is create these directories and get inside the directory. But before we came into GitHub, we already created these on our desktop, so we don't need to do that. So we can jump right down to the git init command. So inside of our TC349 folder that we created, go ahead and type git init. What this does is exactly what it says here. It initialized an empty Git repository inside of our directory. This directory will ultimately get committed up to GitHub. So you can see the next commands on here are touch readme, but we already created a readme file, so we can just jump right down here to the git add readme. But I'm going to give you a little shortcut. Instead of typing git add readme, we can just type git add star, and that will add all the files and directories in the current folder. So if we type git add star and then type git status, we can see what we have in there. And actually you'll notice that it didn't create the folders because there isn't anything in the folders. So as soon as you put stuff inside those folders, they will show up in a git add and a git status. So for now we can just go ahead and leave them because we have something to commit here, and as soon as we start working on our projects and committing it, those folders will show up. So at this point we have a file added to the queue to be committed. And you can see that right here. It says changes to be committed. So this is where we pool all of our changes together before we commit them into the repository. So at this point, we're ready to commit because I don't want to change anything else. So we're going to go ahead and type git commit. And you always need to provide a message to git commit. So you can give it a little note about what you're committing. And in our case, this is just the initial upload. Okay, so now you can see here that we've committed our files. So now if we do a git status, you can see there's nothing to commit because we've already committed the changes. So now if we were to go change the README file and then come back here and type git status, git status would tell us, hey, this file has been changed, and then you would have options on what to do with it at that point. So right now we have a clean repository, but our changes have only been committed locally. So that's the cool thing about Git, is it's a distributed version control system, which means when I download that repository, I'm downloading everything. So I'm also committing locally to my own repository. And then what we're essentially doing is syncing that repository with another one, in this case GitHub. So to get GitHub talking to our local repository, we need to use these git remote add origin commands. And what this is going to do is it's going to add our GitHub account and repository to the remotes of this GitHub of our Git repository, and that will allow us to type things like git push u origin master and send all those changes up to GitHub. And so if you can see up here, what we're doing, git remote add, we're adding a remote called origin at this address, and then on this next line we're pushing to that same remote to the master branch of this repository. And we're not going to get too far into branches in Git in this class, but basically a branch is just an alternate section of the same source code or the same file. And we'll talk about that a little more in depth at another time. So at this point, if we go back to our GitHub account and refresh or just click continue, we can now see that our README file that we created here is now in our Git repository, and we could read that, but there's nothing in it, so that's kind of boring. And you can also see my message I typed for my commit, and if we click on that, we can see a more detailed commit history. And I have all the information I need about this particular project. And now the cool thing is that others can come in here and clone and share, and you can share access to all of these commits and repositories. So for now, we're going to use this to hand in assignments. I think it's a really cool social way to do this. And this is also going to teach you to use Git, which is going to be really important if you end up doing any kind of web design or development in a professional setting. You're going to be working with some type of version control system, and the one that most people are using today is Git. So I hope this helps. If you have any questions, you know what to do. Talk to you guys soon.